Welcome to DDL. I'm Justin. This is T. We're going to get into it.
Welcome to Fan Favorite Fridays.
All right.
So, unfortunately, once again, we had someone scheduled to come on with us to have a conversation between the sexes on different topics. And once again, accountability not held.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just one of those people who, if I'm going to tell you I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there.
Yep.
And hey, if you know what, if I don't want to show up, I'm not going to agree to it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're going to say you're going to be there to do something, you do it.
Yeah. Well, we've got us, so
yep.
Stick
so
with it.
We're going to change topics from that to our Fan Favorite Fridays and go over some conspiracy theories.
Hey.
So, in the intermission, while we were in between filming, we decided that we would not go past Pearl Harbor.
Oh, as far as back in time.
Yeah, backwards in time.
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor is an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of want to hit Pearl Harbor,
Okay.
JFK,
Okay.
and 9/11. Those are three big major events in the world. I mean, they're Do we want to cover the space one?
We could touch. We'll see what time looks like, and we can touch on it.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe
Yeah.
Maybe we could save it for another time as well.
Yeah, because the space one's fun.
Yes. That one's more a little zany.
Yeah.
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 So I
So
like that.
Pearl Harbor, you were saying you don't know, you know, like the general conspiracy theory, but you don't necessarily know some of the details.
Well, and again, I look back as history kind of unfolds. It becomes less and less of a theory and more of a it's pretty apparent what we were doing.
Well, the government did release the documents, and it actually has proof in those documents showing that they did know what was happening.
What?
Yeah, our government never lies to us.
Unless they feel like it's for our best interest, which is all the time.
So the general overview of the Pearl Harbor conspiracy theory,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't necessarily, I would agree with you. I don't think it's necessarily a conspiracy theory anymore. It's more it's more proven to be true, which is Pearl Harbor was allowed to happen in order for the United States to enter the war in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So, why don't you go ahead and kind of give your understanding of the theory?
Yeah, it's because there wasn't a lot of pro-war sentiment at the time. A lot of Americans were kind of more of the, hey, let's take care of our country. We're still not recovered from the Great Depression. So there's no way we can afford to get involved in another war. Let them take care of them. And so in order to drum up interest, the only way to go about that was to allow an attack to happen on American soil. Mm-hmm. And when they allowed it to happen, that was kind of the catalyst that got them involved into the war and kind of stirred up a lot of the pro-USA rhetoric and caused people who otherwise were dead set against another war to get invested in it. And also they marketed it as this is a good thing because it's going to produce jobs. It's going to produce manufacturing and all sorts of other things. And that was really, I think it was more of an economic thing than a moral thing as far as, hey, we need to stop the Nazis. We need to stop Hitler. We need to stop these terrible atrocities that are happening. And no, let's find a way to drum up our economy. Because we're still recovering from the worst financial crash of the known history.
Well, there was a promise made to Churchill that Americans would support the war effort.
Mm-hmm.
I don't disagree with you. There was definitely an economic incentive in order joining the war effort.
Mm-hmm.
War is profitable. War is good for the economy.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't disagree with you there. However, there was a promise made to Churchill that the Americans would enter the war. The problem was, like you said, there was no appetite from the American people.
Right.
So how do you get that appetite?
Mm-hmm.
You nailed it right on the head. An attack on American soil.
Mm-hmm.
How did that happen, though? How did that come to fruition? How did Pearl Harbor actually take place and transpire? And this is where you said you might be a little lacking on the details.
Well, as far as knowing, hey, they had several of their major battleships were not in port that day. Several people who should have otherwise been at the barracks were not there. It was really kind of a ragtag group that should have actually been fully stationed there. And so there was a lot of little things that even if you're not a conspiracy theorist, you got to look at it and go, that's weird. And I think when it comes to conspiracy theories on a bigger scale, I just like Jesse Ventura would say, I'm just asking questions. It's, it's interesting to entertain questions and go, yeah, that's really strange, the behavior leading up to what happened. Yeah.
So where I was going with this is how did Japan actually even decide that they were going to attack Pearl Harbor? What events led up to Japan deciding that they were going to go ahead and do this?
Now this is a guess or maybe an educated guess. They intercepted communications from America that kind of were more or less. It was a throwing some bait out to allow Japan to intercept communications. Is that correct or no?
No, sir. No.
Oh, okay.
So what ended up happening was so Japan was running out of oil. And their expansion into this, they needed to expand into the Indo-Pacific down south, right? However, there were trade barriers put in place, sanctions from the U.S. put in place on this. Negotiations were taking place between Japan and the U.S. in order to help facilitate some of the movement. What ended up happening was the U.S., while on the brink of getting the Japan to agree to it, and actually Japan actually did agree to it, pulled out of the negotiations, forcing their hand. So the only logical choice they had left was to go to war in order to secure petroleum. With that being said, they went ahead and looked at how were they going to expand with military defense provided by the United States. They had to take out the American fleet, which is where things started becoming interesting, where Pearl Harbor was actually, because Pearl Harbor at that point was the headquarters for the Pacific Fleet. A few things leading up to it that are very questionable, or at least in my opinion, they're very questionable, is the amount of ships in port or in harbor was unprecedented.
Yes.
Never before and never again has the number of ships been in harbor at the same time. So naval intelligence knew that the Japanese launched their fleet.
Yeah.
They knew the course that they were taking. And when they lost it, well, that battery did not last long, did it? No. When they lost track of the fleet, there was only one destination that they could have been going to from a strategic sense.
Right.
And that was Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, without bombing civilians. Yeah.
So that information was relayed all the way up to the president. No action, no warning was given to Pearl Harbor. Now, and when I say like I'm speaking as fact, because the documents that the government have released now show that everything I just said is true. Where the conspiracy comes into play is why. Why was it allowed to happen? Not necessarily what the facts are anymore. The facts support that these are actual events that happened. You are right. There were key personnel and key ships that were not there. But the simple fact that the majority of the fleet was there and decimated was definitely put into place. Pearl Harbor happens. Manufacturing goes in overdrive. We're restocking the Pacific Fleet. But while that theater is active, there is really no push on the Pacific side. Everything turns towards the Europe side. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this one. But I've heard that war was declared on Germany prior to being declared on Japan. I'm not 100% sure that's accurate. But yeah, definitely Pearl Harbor was used as a way to enter into the European theater for
Right.
war. So, I mean, those facts are facts. Really, the only conspiracy left is why was it allowed to happen? More or less. There you go.
And again, it's people in power leveraging human life to get what they want. And it's funny because for normal people, this is unimaginable.
Yeah.
Because when we're just dealing with each other day to day, we're just trying to get through life. We're trying to generally trying to not be terrible people. So when people who are in power literally use humans as pawns on a chessboard to get what they want, whether it be power or wealth or fame or so be it, whatever it is.
Yep.
To us, it's like, no, they would never do that. Well, people in power actually would.
Yeah.
And not everyone in power would, but when you have that amount of power at your fingertips, literally world domination, you think differently than just the guy who's clocking in and trying to get a paycheck for his family.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
So you actually, before we started this, you were talking about the bombs dropped on Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't necessarily a conspiracy theory, but it's an interesting conversation point, which is, did the bombs actually have to be dropped?
I would argue that they did not. We had beaten into submission so much of not only overtaken a good amount of Germany, but also Russia was very active as well. And, our campaign to go from island to island to take out the Japanese was very successful. And I've heard it said, well, they never would have surrendered. And it's like, okay, show me that that's true. Look, the Japanese people are a very proud people, but you can't tell me that, well, the argument, well, we had to drop a nuclear bomb. Did we? Did it have to be a nuclear bomb? Or were we just dropping a nuclear bomb because we got a brand new shiny toy and we wanted to see what we could do with it? We wanted to see the damage that we could entail and how much human lives it would cost. And again, that power play of, I don't care how many human lives it costs. I want to see how this works, and I want to flex muscle. And if we're able to make this function, people will be afraid of us for the next 100 years. And what could we not have done the same amount of damage by dropping multiple bombs across Japan and tore up infrastructure, but also given people a chance, especially civilians, a chance to find shelter or hide, because a sustained air raid attack would have done a lot of the same damage without killing as many civilian lives. Mm-hmm. And so it was also unprecedented to have that many civilian human casualties in war. It literally was, hey, these are the rules of engagement. We're going to throw all those rules out the window to drop 2 major bombs. And we didn't even wait for the first one to see what the effect was. We dropped one, and then we were ready to send the other one. It wasn't about trying to get out of the war as quickly as possible. I think it was the exact opposite. It was to incur the most civilian damage possible. Mm-hmm. And it was to try to bring Japan to its knees. And I looking at it as an American historian, because history is my major, it's one of those sore spots for me, because you're told rah rah rah, root for your country, and our leaders are never bad, and they would never steer us wrong. I think the same narrative that says, well, we couldn't do anything else but get into the war after that point. I think it's that same thing of, well, Japan just never would have surrendered, so we had no choice but to drop these nukes. Like we were doing the best thing for Japan. No, we weren't.
I don't think anyone would make the argument we did the best thing for Japan. I think the argument would be made that we did the best thing for American lives.
Well, I've heard the way I've heard it leveraged though is us dropping those nuclear bombs actually was better for Japan because
Ooh, I've never heard that.
because they wouldn't have surrendered anyway. So basically, us going so extreme in the long run actually saved lives because it made them surrender sooner than they otherwise would have.
Fair. So I'm going to take a different stance.
Sure.
Than you. So I would agree that Japan, the Japanese people are very proud and have a lot of honor, and they would fight to
Yes.
the very end.
Yes.
I'm not saying they would never surrender. 100%. I believe that we could have done landing troops on the island in order to subdue them.
Yeah.
I 100% we agree that we could have done that.
Yeah.
My stance would be the cost of American lives was already extremely high in the European theater.
Sure.
And we had incurred quite a bit of losses while taking back the islands, going island to island. That the dropping of the bombs actually saved American lives. Now, my favorite president actually is Harry Truman. And the reason he's my favorite president is because he had to make the decision that nobody else on this planet has ever made, which is deploying a nuclear weapon against humans. The level of thought, the level of stress and culpability he must have felt had to be extremely high, because you are weighing the lives of Japanese people versus the lives of American soldiers. Who in their right mind could really weigh that? Is anyone capable of really weighing that? Right. So I have a lot of respect. I think Harry Truman, for the simple reason that he is the only president or only person on the planet who has had to make that decision. I have a lot of he becomes kind of my favorite. Not because he did ultimately decide to drop the bomb. I don't think dropping the bomb was a good thing. I would disagree with you that doing air bombing would have accomplished the same thing as the nuclear bombs. 100% disagree with you there. There's never been a war that has been won from air raids alone. Never. Except for one, which is the 2 bombs that were dropped in Japan. That was the only time that an air raid has proven successfully to end a war. And because the level of carnage was so great.
Right.
The bad part about that is, from a moral stance, there were non-enemy combatants that had to be sacrificed in that
Millions and millions.
So I'm not saying it was good that it happened. I'm just saying I understand the reason why the decision was made.
Well, you could say, well, it's only happened once, and that's because we dropped those bombs. But I think when you see everything around you failing, when you see Germany fall, when you see Italy fall, when you see Russia advancing, when you see America advancing, I fully, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but I fully disagree with the sentiment that it was the only way. That there's no way that was the only way for it to happen. And again, to cross the line, to say, well, we did the best thing for Americans, and we did this and we did that. Can you imagine the outrage if that would have happened to us? If the tables were flipped? It's just, and again, I going back to the Israel-Palestine conflict, loss of innocent life is tragic in any war situation, and we should do everything we can to minimize the loss of innocent life, whoever we're fighting. And that maximized human loss. And so it's no question it did the most damage it could have done. And so to innocent humans. And that's why morally, I actually am fully against what we did there. And we try to revise it and try to make us still look like the good guys. We weren't the good guys when that happened. That was one of the most evil acts in warfare in human history. It's worse than what Genghis Khan did. To me, it is beyond the pale to incinerate that amount of people. And again, I go back to, I think we did it just to see what would happen, because we ran the tests. We did the tests in the desert, and we wanted to see what would happen. And we played games with innocent civilian lives. If it was a military base, okay, fine. And there was some fallout from it. Okay, I understand that. But the targets were city centers where the majority of the populations lived. Yeah, to me, it's kind of an unforgivable thing that we did, but we don't hold ourselves as a country to the same standard. Versus if somebody else would have done that, oh man, it would have been written in the history books, what an atrocity. But since we wrote the history, hey, it was something we had to do. They weren't going to surrender. We had no other options, and well, it was to save our own people's lives. And it's like we can write that later on, but I look at it and I go, I think it's one of the biggest moral failings in America, aside from maybe slavery.
So you are right. I was not saying that was the only option.
Sure.
Right. I specifically said that we could have done a ground invasion.
Right.
And I completely respect what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because it was a great moral downfall for the U.S. dropping those bombs. Not going to disagree with you there.
Yeah.
The amount of human life that we ended up taking, it was atrocious.
Yeah.
And I'm not sitting here defending. What I'm
Right.
doing is I'm sitting here saying I can understand having to be put in that difficult position,
The strategy,
and
yeah.
weighing the lives. That I think that's kind of where I'm living in the world of gray in this one. Now, every life is valuable. We've talked at length on this one, and this is going to sound really bad, but what I'm trying to say is weighing the life of an enemy versus weighing the life of your fellow citizen. That is where I'm trying to draw the distinction. All life lost is bad,
Right,
and atrocious.
right.
But I'm saying I can understand and I respect the decision that was made, even though I don't like the outcome that came from it.
Here's where the difference is for me. The lives that would have been lost on the American side would have been military lives who were pledged to give their lives for their country. And instead of, and look, hey, I don't want any Americans to die, but hey, when you sign up for battle, yeah, that's sort of what you get. And to be fair, a lot of them were drafted as well. But I look at that and I go, the difference is the civilians didn't sign up for it. And that's where I go, well, what's the value of a military life versus a civilian life? I don't know, but again, I go back to,
I can't make that distinction.
yeah, but there's but getting into the, well, they were an enemy, and so it's one thing for us to bomb the enemy. The enemy is not the civilians. The enemy is the engaged military. And when you bomb innocent women and children who have nothing to do with this conflict and are discussing dad life, they're trying to do the best that they can do for their family, and innocent women and children are sacrificed at the altar of, well, we wanted to, because again, they could have dropped those bombs anywhere. They chose the highest density city centers to
That's not accurate, though.
But besides Tokyo.
Well, no, there was, if I remember correctly, it was the number 3 and number 5 largest.
Okay, so the 3rd and 5th largest, top 5.
But I understand.
So instead of hitting New York and L.A., they hit Dallas and Chicago. Yeah. So
no, I don't disagree with you there.
Right.
And this is why I kind of, from a moral standpoint, I understand what you're getting at, and I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
Drop nuclear weapons, that level of power in the hands of humans is insane.
Yes.
Were there effects of dominance shown on that? 100%. The other thing that I think should be worth mentioning is the Pacific theater. The level of atrocities were much greater than in the European theater perpetrated by the United States.
Yes.
No, so I'm not sitting here trying to say that any of this was right.
Right.
What I'm trying to say is dropping the bombs did save American lives from a soldier's perspective, I'm not making a distinction because a soldier's perspective versus a civilian's perspective on this. We were at war with that country. We wanted to end that war.
Yeah.
At the least lives lost to our citizens.
But again, the military would say there's a distinction between civilian life and
100%.
combat life.
I
So
we've
again,
even talked about it because
Right.
I'm like
Right.
Obama. I hate the fact that he bombs women and children.
right,
Or he did.
right. Rules of engagement were crossed.
Yeah.
And we broke our own moral code that we set out. We said this is the standard for how we fight war, and we broke it. And we broke it willingly, and we didn't even apologize for it. Or did we sign an apology? I think years later we. By the way, in light of all this, how cool are Japanese people? Like they could, of all people, they have every right to hate America. And how we treated their people. We put them in internment camps here within the States.
Yep.
We treated them terribly. And Japanese people are like, yeah, whatever. The forgiveness for them, like, wow, that blows my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
No, you're 100%. I mean, I personally love Japan. I want to go to Tokyo.
Yeah.
I want to go check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to get shoved into a subway, but yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
But so I think we covered the bomb dropping
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's
that's
good.
two very different perspectives
Yeah.
on, and I don't think either one of us is, I mean, kind of our own moral compasses.
Yeah, opinions.
Granted-
You can't say somebody's wrong there. It's just, hey, here's my perspective and your perspective.
And I think we both agree that we should not have any more nuclear arsenals on the planet, personally.
Right.
That is way too much destructive power, and a nuclear war is not going to end good for anyone.
Right.
We can get into a nuclear war, ain't nobody going to win it.
Right. Everybody loses. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. There was one more portion. No. Was there?
For Pearl Harbor specifically?
Or World War II?
Oh, World War II. I don't think I had anything else, unless you had something in mind.
The Bell? Nazi Germany, the Bell?
No idea.
Oh, my God. Well, there's the theory that Hitler didn't actually kill himself. And he was in Argentina and stuff like that.
Okay.
But then there was also the occult. The SS was heavily involved in the occult, and they produced the Bell, which some people are theorizing is a time machine.
Oh.
Stuff like that. I mean,
Oh, wow.
We
Yeah,
we go way down in rabbit holes on.
Yeah,
what
I'm
the
not
Germans-
familiar with any
what
of
Nazi
that.
Germany was trying to do, but I mean,
Honestly, though, them being in the occult completely makes sense with the brainwashing and the going along with programming, and
oh yeah.
that would make sense.
What about the theory that the Germany would have been defeated by Russia, whether or not the United States got involved at all? I'm actually a firm believer in that. By the time the United States got involved in the war, the USSR had already started pushing the Germans back.
Well, that's where I go back to Hitler wouldn't have stopped. Okay, you want to say the Japanese people wouldn't have stopped unless we dropped the bombs. Unless Hitler was fighting a war on two fronts, I don't think he would have stopped either. I think he was so, the poker term, he was so pot committed. He was all in. It was either I dominate the world or I die. I think that was his commitment to it all.
I guess my stance is he was pot committed.
Yeah.
He was either going to conquer it or die.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm saying is the inevitable end of him would have happened regardless if the U.S. entered the war or not.
I think the two fronts was just enough. I think it did take us coming in, and if the other forces would have held out for longer, the British forces, the Allied forces, if they would have held out for longer, I would agree with you. But they were so decimated that they were very unsuccessful in their warfare against Hitler on the Western Front.
You're talking the French?
Yeah, yeah.
Didn't they roll over in World War I, and then World War II, they built all the defenses, and as soon as it would happen, they were just
make love, not war. That should be their motto.
God.
Yeah, no, and that's where the American troops. I think we replenished at just the right time for that Western Front, because Adolf Hitler could have, with the pressure coming in from the rear, he could have pressed in westward and tried to find a tactical advantage to try, and that's where I think we came in at just the right time when everybody else had been fighting for up to 4 or 5 years at that point. And so finally it was like, okay, here come the Americans. I think it was just right place, right time, just so happened. But yes, Russia completely dominated their side of the war. They and a lot of it was the harsh winters. A lot of it was just unpreparedness for what was going to happen.
Yeah, because Russia got caught with their pants down, basically.
Germany.
No, Russia did.
So, as far as being attacked.
Yeah. So they were unprepared because they had signed that treaty and everything with Nazi Germany. Mm-hmm. And then Germans, broke that.
Oops.
And they were caught with their pants down. But as soon as they started like getting caught back up,
mm-hmm.
they put on at a huge loss of life.
Yeah.
I mean, the Russian or the USSR, their soldiers' death toll, I think is like 4 times higher than everyone else's combined.
Right.
I mean, so don't get me wrong. There was a lot of life lost from Russia and able to do what they did. What I'm saying is the amount of pressure that the U.S. was able to put on the backside, on the second front, was negligible. It might have taken an extra year, but Russia would have done the job regardless.
But just being able to hold, I think, was huge. Just being able to hold and slightly advance was huge because otherwise it would have just been a push westward. And so,
however, there was if you take a look at the manufacturing ability that the Germans had at that point, mm-hmm. and along with the oil reserves that they had at that point, they were basically scraping the bottom of the barrel. They were out.
That was more when America came in.
That's what I'm saying is America came in at that point where they were hitting the bottom of the barrel. So if we went to came in, they would be hitting the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
It might have taken an extra year, but they would have been able to do it.
But that's where they would have been tactically able to go to other places that they had conquered and
but they had destroyed.
Swept through.
But they had destroyed.
Right.
Right. So I think it's half of one, 6 dozen of the other.
Yeah. And Russia, man, don't poke that bear. And
no.
Yeah, and just for anybody who might be thinking about it now, today in 2024, just don't poke that bear. Just let that sleeping bear lie. Because honestly, if Germany wouldn't have done that, who knows? Because Russia probably would have sat there and gone, "If this is none of our business."
If Hitler had some. Well, the dude obviously had some mental issues. Mm-hmm. When it came to some of the tactical things that he was trying to do, he was actually not terrible at.
Yeah.
However, he never fully committed to. If he would have gone after Britain and if he would have pressed his attack on Britain a little bit more, he would have been able to conquer all of Europe.
Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
Instead, he decided to. Okay, we're not making headway, and he starts to go after Russia. Mm-hmm. It's like you made some tactical errors when otherwise he was making some tactically really good calls. Mm-hmm. Tactically speaking, not morally sound in any way, shape, or form. Don't get those two mixed up.
Right.
And I need to specify that because people don't understand the differences.
Yes. Yeah.
There's nuance to life.
Yeah.
A guy can do extremely bad things and still be smart.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So Nazi Germany is interesting.
Yeah. No.
Okay. You want to move on to the JFK assassination?
JFK.
Should we even go into that? Because it's really not a conspiracy anymore. Everybody already knows the CIA did it.
Well, they didn't officially release the documents, though, which unfortunately, that's the thing with Trump, where he was like, "I'm going to release the documents," and then all of a sudden it's just like, I think somebody said something to him where he's like, "Never mind." I think he legitimately was just like,
they passed the picture of JFK.
Yes. Like, and
Think about that one a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the only thing that I can think of as to why it wasn't released, because we all know. We all like, oh, hey, Lee Harvey Oswald shot. Okay. And then he's the only eyewitness that's available, and then he
And then what's
and then
the gangster comes and
yes,
kills him, right?
he comes in and he's allowed in there in a maximum security. Yeah.
And he was so heartbroken.
He just walks in.
He was just so heartbroken that the president was.
Yeah. No. Yeah. The only alive person who can recount what happened on that day from the perspective is taken out magically. So yeah. Anyway, what about specifics as far as that goes?
Well, I mean, there's so many theories that came up out of there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm the simple fact that the American people now in 2024 all are in agreement that the CIA did it.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I don't even think the conspiracy theory even needs to be talked about anymore. Everyone already knows it's up.
Yeah.
That's kind of my thought.
I was thinking to myself, what if George W. Bush's Mission Accomplished banner wasn't for the war in Iraq, but it was actually for good job, Dad? Like a little nod to Dad for what he did. You know, George W. Bush's father, George Bush Sr., being the head of the CIA around that same exact time. Just interesting. Yeah. And it's interesting because it wasn't until everything was fine until JFK started talking about the powers that be and saying, hey, you know, we need to push back against that and we need a free people. And as he started talking more and more about institutionalized power, that was all of a sudden where things started to change. Yeah.
100%. They did. One of the biggest things or biggest questions that I always asked, and I always figured it was an inside job because of this, is none of the weaponry from the United States government was accounted for. Meaning they didn't do any policing. They didn't check anything. And you would think that would be one of the first things you do when investigating this is like, okay, who fired what, where, double check all the ammo, make sure all accounts are right.
Yeah.
The simple fact that didn't happen always suggested to me that it was an inside job.
Yeah. Well, and back then you could be sloppy because who's going to dig into it?
Yeah. Right. It's not like today's day and age where like information is spreading like that and you have independent journalists going.
Yeah. Did we match the bullet to the gun? We don't have to. A bullet went in. Like, let's just take it. Like, we're not going to run any of that work. And if we just cover it up. And so then again, that opens itself up to so many more questions and so much more scrutiny.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't wait until Donald Trump wins and makes that presidential assassination and attempt commission and appoints RFK to head that up and let RFK show that his uncle and his father were taken out by the CIA.
Absolutely. And Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh, yeah. We got to lump him in. But that wasn't CIA. That was FBI.
Oh, that was what's his name? Not Hoover. Who was the head at the time of the FBI? Specifically, I can't remember the gentleman's name
either. But
slipped right out of my mind. I'm gonna be watching this later. Go, you idiot! And also, all of you people who are conspiracy theorists, you're sitting there going, you guys are forgetting this. We know, we're just giving an overview. So we're not digging deep into it. But we apologize. Please, in the comments, let us know why all of these things have been proven correct and what rabbit holes we missed on these. So
because we're going a high level. I mean, we didn't even talk about the grassy knoll.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to touch that.
Yeah.
Nope, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable enough knowing that everyone pretty much is in agreement that the CIA killed JFK and RFK's father, Bobby. I mean, and I can't wait until RFK can go in front of the American people and be like, here's the damn proof.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be...
As soon as that happens, I'm just going to slow clap.
Yeah.
Feel free, man, and I'm glad you got some redemption out of all this. You know, like, something good came from it.
Yeah, I was actually... in Denver on was it the 50th or the 60th anniversary of the RFK assassination attempt.
RFK. JFK?
No, RFK.
Oh, Bobby.
Yeah,
Oh,
on Bobby.
Sorry.
Yeah. And so the person that we were sitting at the hotel bar, me and my friend, and there was a very tall gentleman dressed, to the nines, older guy, and he actually spoke to us and told us how he was actually part of, like, very, very close to the Kennedy family, and he was appointed as a clerk or an assistant within the administration at the time of the assassination, and kind of was recounting some of his experiences from it. And that I asked him specifically, I was like, so, what do you think as far as who did it? And he just smiled at me, and he kind of gave me a wink and a nod, kind of like, I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole, but whatever you think is probably most correct. And it was just like, wow, to meet that guy on the day of the anniversary, and just so, because we were watching CNN and it had the chyron that said, the anniversary of the assassination date of RFK Jr. or RFK, sorry, not Jr. Sorry, RFK, and to have him sit there and just kind of make an offhanded comment of like how he was involved with it, it was just like, is this real life? Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Fair.
yeah.
Oh, okay. RFK. Let's go touch the big one now.
Yeah.
9/11.
All right.
Okay, so there are so many rabbit holes that have come up out of the 9/11. The simple fact that the reporting, the commission, was, let's say, inadequate.
Mm-hmm.
That whole report that they put out. World Trade Center 7. That's an interesting one we can go down. The support beams cut at perfect 45s. That's an interesting rabbit hole we can go down. The jet fuel, whether or not that's hot enough to melt steel, that's an interesting one you can go down. We can actually talk about the Pentagon, the plane that crashed into the Pentagon, and how the rubble, the carnage from that does not actually support a 747. We actually talk about the flight path that the Pentagon would have had to have taken, whether or not a Boeing 747 could have actually made that flight path without being detected.
Right.
I mean, there are
on a government building in DC.
Oh, we lost all 3 lights. Dang, guys, sorry. Yeah. I'm gonna have to buy batteries, secondary batteries, so we can swap these out.
Yeah.
Or get ones that plug in.
Yeah. Direct in,
yeah, because this is new. We have not been typically going this far or this long.
Okay, yeah.
So we did this last week, and we did it again this week, where all 3 died out, but that's okay. So where do we want to start on 9/11?
Honestly, I'll let you lead and guide that one. I've heard just kind of the overview stuff, and just, did you know jet fuel can't melt steel beams, and did you know, and did you know, and did you, and I've just kind of heard a lot of the talking points, and I'm like, okay, but I haven't gotten really deep into digging into it for myself. But again, a lot of questions, a lot of weird things going on surrounding the events leading up to it. So yeah.
I think the most logical place to start is with Senior. Yeah, Senior. So, Senior made a deal with Saudi Arabia, and basically had to, when he became president, had to make good on his payment, which is what was one of Saudi Arabia's biggest enemies? Iraq, Saddam. So, the Gulf War?
Yes.
What was that, 10 days, I think it was, if I remember correctly?
It lasted a hair longer than that, but yeah. It started in January of I don't know when it started, but it was definitely going in January of 91, because I remember they talked about it on the Super Bowl between the Bills and I think it was the Redskins. Maybe it was it was the Giants, Bills and Giants Super Bowl, and they were talking about but yeah, It
Yeah.
didn't go. It didn't go for more than
it was-
maybe 6 months.
Yeah, it was
tops. Yeah.
It was a very small, very short-lived.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Senior failed to remove Saddam Hussein.
Mm-hmm.
So he fails to win re-election.
Mm-hmm.
But then his sons magically become governors.
Mm-hmm.
And then one son helps the other son in Florida become the president.
Well,
Okay, that might be stretching it just slightly.
yeah,
But
it's interesting that of the battleground state that had the only one that had reporting errors just so happened to be the one. It's interesting. Again, I go back to 2020. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It of all 50 states, it just so that's
Yeah.
at best it's very coincidental. So
Yes. And we're just asking questions.
like Jesse Ventura, I'm just asking questions. Yeah.
So anyway, Jeb
Yes.
helps his father or helps his brother ascend to the presidency. And then
Or helps his brother. Yeah.
helps his
I
brother.
think you said father.
I did, and then I corrected it.
Okay.
I
Gotcha.
did say father, and then I corrected it to brother. But yeah, and then Junior needs to make Senior happy.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to make him proud. How do you get a war going? Well, blueprint's already been played or laid out. Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
You need the American people to back it. Well, how do you get the American people to back it? Interestingly enough, you need some sort of event with American lives lost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that he orchestrated it. I'm not saying any of that.
I don't think he's smart enough to orchestrate anything of that magnitude.
However, there is ample evidence to suggest that there is a greater look should have been more of a look should have been put onto what happened rather than the commission that they did and what they were. Nonetheless, it was very interesting that bin Laden and his family, 9/11 happens. The planes at the Twin Towers, everyone alive at that point and remembered seeing it. It's going to be in our minds forever.
Oh, absolutely.
We lived through it.
Absolutely.
I remember exactly where I was.
Yeah, where were you?
I was actually late for school. I was on my way to school, and it came on the radio that the Twin Towers had been struck. And I pulled in to this high school. I went to go check in, and I said, "Hey, did you guys hear about this?" And they're just like, "What?" And they let the entire school know, and everyone turned on, and that's all we did the rest of the day.
Yeah,
it was
just watch
the news.
Wow. Yeah, I had just moved up to Boise, and I had done two years of college at College of Southern Idaho, and I had an opportunity to do kind of an internship through a church where it was kind of we would be there kind of all day, reading our Bible, praying, classes, in service at the church, all sorts of stuff. So it was a program specifically designed for like spiritual advancement. And three of us were riding in from Nampa to Boise in the car, and we heard it on the radio as we were coming in. Same deal. And we were like, what? Because they were still trying to piece it together. They were just reporting that the first plane hit, and they weren't sure if it was an accident or what was happening. And then we showed up there, and we told the pastor who was over the program, and he said, yeah, we heard. And so they had the TVs on, and we physically watched that second plane hit, kind of along with the rest of America. And so, yeah, from there we were just like, well, I guess we're going to do a lot more praying than anything else today. So,
yeah. I mean, that everyone who lived at that point probably is going to remember that day.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
It was a very unifying moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Much like JFK.
Yeah.
Everybody knows where they were when that happened. Yeah.
So, like I said, the blueprint was already laid out into place.
Mm-hmm.
Pearl Harbor was the blueprint.
Yeah.
Was 9/11 a Pearl Harbor moment? I think it's feasible. I don't necessarily know if it's true.
Right.
I just think it's feasible. Which is why I love conspiracy theories, is because when the government is shady and does not give you the answers and they leave so many open questions, it makes it plausible. Doesn't necessarily make it true. It just makes it plausible,
Sure.
and it's interesting to me to run that thought process, to
Yeah.
run that thought experiment.
Yeah.
What I do find interesting is after the planes hit the towers, all planes were grounded in the U.S. except for the planes that were removing bin Laden's family from the U.S. That was interesting. Just begs the question, why? Okay. It also starts opening the question of, well, what's the relationship between the bin Laden family and the Bush family? There's actually quite an in-depth one. So does that play a factor? I don't know. But there is a connection there.
Yeah.
So what I do find interesting is, like, anytime that there's a terrorist act like that, you always want to follow the money.
Yeah.
None of the money went to Iraq, was traced back to Iraq. So why did we invade Iraq? That excellent question in my mind, worth asking.
And we did wait before we invaded. We at least gave it 2 years before we actually invaded Iraq. But yeah. Why were they the target?
Yep. How did that get lumped into it? Because everything that was found was showing it went through Afghanistan, through terror cells in Afghanistan. Nothing implicated Iraq in any way, shape, or form. So how did that happen?
Well, and that's when we were told about, weapons of mass destruction, which and we actually, again, that group that we prayed for congressmen and senators and stuff, we actually were speaking with a couple of the Idaho legislators at the time. I believe it was Craig and Crapo, and it was one of the young representatives at the time as well, and they all confirmed. They said, at first we were against going to war, but we saw the information that was given to us, and we can't really tell you much about it other than to say it was so compelling that we felt there was no option other than to go to war. And so, again, but yet we go there and there's absolutely nothing to be found. Yeah. So,
So, again, it's worth the question.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Saddam gets taken out.
Which
Saudis
was
are
maybe
happy.
the goal.
Yeah, which was the goal.
Yeah.
Junior made Senior proud.
Yeah. Either way, whether you believe in the conspiracy or whether you don't, that was probably the ultimate goal. When you look at the lack of weapons, it's like,
Yeah. And then the military-industrial complex and everything that just the perpetual economics of the war.
Yep.
I mean, you can't fight a war on terrorism. It's a never-ending war.
Hey. You pronounced it incorrectly. It's a war on terror.
Oh, fair.
Some of the ways George W. Bush talked were just, man, that guy was hilarious.
Yeah. So that runs its course on how we got into Iraq and whatnot, and the conspiracy theories on how this all played out. But then you start diving into each of the in particulars. Like, so let's talk World Trade Center 7. Not struck by a plane, but it burned, collapsed, destroyed. How?
Wait, I thought the initial hit was on.
If I remember
on
right,
that building.
No. There's only
we only physically saw the one impact, right? Oh, that's no. You're right because the other tower fell, and it was because of the force of the first tower falling. Was kind of the story we were given, right?
World Trade Center 7 was not one of the two towers. World Trade Center 7 was a different.
Center.
So you know what?
Bring it up.
Let's see if we can bring
hopefully. Depending on the computer here.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't start glitching out. Is it glitching? No, not too bad.
Oh,
yet.
wow.
Not too
Pretty
bad.
smooth.
Yet. So let's go World Trade Center map.
Yeah, because I have been to at the new site where they reconstructed there. So
where they made the One World Tower.
Oh my word! So, I'll tell you about that later. My brother and I went to visit it in New York. It was
Okay. So let's go here. Are we glitchy? No, not too terrible. So let's go to swap it over to screen share and
Yeah.
bring us over to here.
Okay.
So this is the layout for the World Trade Centers.
Okay.
So this is the World Trade Center Plaza.
Yeah.
Towers 1 and 2. These are the towers that got hit.
Yes.
This is Tower 7.
Yeah.
Or World Trade Center 7. This is a building. The planes struck over here.
Right.
6, 5, 4, and 3. Yes, there was superficial damage. None of them were destroyed.
Yeah.
7, however, the furthest one away, was burnt down. Destroyed.
Okay.
How? Why? What was housed there?
Now that wasn't one of the ones we saw go down on the day of.
No.
Okay.
Supposedly, the according to the commission report, that the fire from World Trade Center 1 spread through the underground tunnels,
right,
and caught World Trade Center 7 on fire.
Which is plausible because it could be maybe there's an open valve or a leak or something that could have sparked that maybe wouldn't have taken out some of the other buildings. So plausible
That they're telling the truth.
Yeah, not.
But it's also plausible that there were information in the building
Okay.
that was purposely taken out.
Okay.
Which is what the conspiracy is how 7 actually got destroyed. It was destroyed in order to take care of some records that were in there.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's accurate or not. I'm just saying it's very interesting that the one where important information that people did not want getting out was destroyed, where the ones that were right next to the 2 main towers were not destroyed.
We're not. So what is the theory behind what specifically was in that building that was so valuable or needed to be destroyed or maybe placed in there to be destroyed?
I can't remember it off the top of my head.
It's hard when you get down these rabbit holes. I get it.
And I'm sure we're not going to find it just off a quick Google search.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it was something to do with some. I think it was some financial records.
Oh, financial records. Oh, okay.
If I remember correctly, but it's been a minute since I
vaguely remember what type of. Yeah.
It's been a minute since I've ran down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. People are screaming right now.
Oh,
it's
sure.
this. It's obviously. Yeah. Sorry.
And I like
this is new to me. So yeah.
I like conspiracy theories. I like diving into them, but I don't necessarily recall everything because I don't necessarily believe that the conspiracy is true.
Right. And if you don't believe it's true, you don't live there. You're not as obsessive about it.
I think it's interesting and I think it's plausible that theory could be true.
Right.
But I'm just like, at this point in my life, I'm like, it's more or less a fun exercise than anything else.
Right. Again, does our government lie to us? Yes. Does our government not always have our best interests when it comes to world affairs? Yes. Does our government do things for money and financial gain? Yes. Does our government, sacrifice human lives for causes? Yes. These are all things we know of. And so then again, okay, where does this all kind of tie together? And for me, like some of the things, it's not a one-to-one connection. It's like we could have found another way to get into the war in Iraq. We could have found another way to kind of go about some of this stuff. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like it's not as provable, like we said, not just with the release of the documents, but even before the release of the documents with Pearl Harbor. It's kind of like a 1-for-1. This one, it's kind of like, okay, I understand the theory behind it, but how does that directly tie to the
a lot of it is just like so let's move on to the jet fuel.
Sure.
Okay, so jet fuel is supposedly does not burn hot enough to melt the steel girders that supported the structure.
Right.
And if you actually look at some of the iconic photos, you can see that it's put at a 45. And then also, if you look at how the towers fell, it was actually like an urban demolition where it's just they pancaked down.
Yeah.
And it was not at free fall speed. It was actually, it was very close to free fall speed. So there's just lots of inconsistencies that beg the question. In the biggest question that I've always asked is, if let's say that jet fuel did burn hot enough to melt the steel. How did it melt the steel at the base?
Right.
Because they were not struck at the base; they were struck at the top.
Right.
That's my first question. My second question is how could we know the identities of the pilot, the terrorists that ran those planes into it? And one of the ways they say that was happened was they found the passport of one of the men on the ground.
Right.
And I'm just like, if they crashed into
that one for me was like, what?
Yeah. So the question, that one to me is a lot more questionable than some of the other ones.
Oh yeah, that was planted evidence. No matter what, that was planted evidence.
It had to have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. They must
like I almost get the envisionment of just like a CIA person walking by, just throwing it down on the ground, and going, "Oh," kicking it. "Hey, what's this?" And somebody else looks down and is like, "Oh my goodness, it's a passport." That's
right.
How hokey it kind of sounds. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, the other thing that ties into that one that is very questionable is how did the government release the names as fast as they did? Like, if I remember correctly, they were starting releasing names within 4 hours of the event. If I remember correctly,
that day was such a blur. I couldn't tell you. Maybe it was. If not, it was definitely within the week.
Oh yeah.
Which was it 18 people or was it less than that?
I can't remember the specific.
Yeah, for that many people, for all the different planes and that many people, kind of interesting that they had that ready to go kind of before all the automated electronic, the way we run things through TSA now. So yeah, because 9/11 changed how we fly.
Oh yeah,
like OJ could have put the knife in his overhead compartment bag, or in his checked bag, getting onto the plane when he was leaving town from LA to Chicago.
If the glove don't fit. Sorry.
So, yeah. Anyway, like we used to be able to bring knives and guns onto planes if we checked them.
Now you can't even get a lighter on board.
Right.
It's insane.
Yeah. And seeing off your family on the way out, that was one of the best. You didn't have to buy a ticket to get into the gate. You just anyway.
So let's move on to the Pentagon, because the Pentagon one to me is the more fascinating of the of the events.
Just real quick. Just as a pushback, devil's avocado for the okay, so it wouldn't be like this and it wouldn't be like that and it wouldn't be like this and it wouldn't be like okay, how many examples do we have of a plane hitting a building and what would happen as far as scientific research and experiments? We don't really know, because how often does that sort of thing happen? But again, I go back to it's just interesting.
You actually just walked into another conspiracy.
Uh-oh.
So
head first. I hit my head right on the steel beam.
So the what is it? NIST? Was it NIST? Or was it the FAA? One of the agencies was actually running experimental or simulations on this exact thing leading up to 9/11. And then on the day of 9/11 was actually, they were running live scenarios of hijacked planes, which is one reason why like interceptors were not put in place fast enough, is because they thought it was an exercise. So interestingly enough, you kind of walked right into another conspiracy that people have out there. I wasn't going to touch that one because I'm not super versed on that one.
Right. But again, what were they using as an example to run into, or that's
supposedly it was actually the World Trade Center itself. That was one of the simulations, was what would happen if a plane struck the World Trade Center.
Oh, so that was the simulation?
The simulation was in fact what actually ended up
occurring. Okay, so you got both sides of it covered if you're a conspiracy theorist. Yeah. So, well, good. Then the conspiracy is now bulletproof.
I'm just saying, like,
right.
It was, man.
If only the government would have had that foresight to make it, to play both sides of it, to make it bulletproof. That would have been great. Yeah,
interesting, right?
Yeah. Wow, I hadn't even heard that one. Okay,
yeah. That's a good one. I from the high level that I've ever looked into it, that was a good one. I didn't dive into that one. I personally like the Pentagon one the best.
Yeah. There's I would say that there's probably the least amount of actual information for that one, because there was less coverage, and also, even though it was a fictitious, a reenactment of kind of what happened, the passenger plane that just kind of crashed out in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. I think there was actually probably the least amount really known about the Pentagon one.
Yeah. Well, and there's reasons why, and one of the biggest reasons I'm more fascinated with that is the simple fact that within minutes of the Pentagon being struck, FBI were collecting surveillance footage from all businesses that were along the flight path. None of that footage has ever been seen. The second thing that I find most interesting about that is the flight path that the plane would have had to take it, and the levels, the altitude that the plane would have had to have taken could not have been maintained by a novice pilot, which that pilot had just learned how to fly with like 2 weeks before or something like that, like something short, where seasoned veteran pilots of Boeing 747 said that it would have been impossible to fly it like that.
Yeah, and I've visited DC, and where it is along the Potomac River along there, it would have, because the building itself really isn't that high.
No, it's super low.
Yeah. So yeah,
it's 5 stories, I think.
Yeah, working the math out on that, it definitely, like, because a lot of the structures in DC are majestic and kind of bigger, but yeah, that one is kind of the way it sits and where it is. Yeah, that
it would have been.
I get that would have been hard.
Yeah,
to strike. Yes,
to the point where seasoned veteran pilots would have said it would have been impossible.
Yeah. Okay.
That they would have struggled to even try to attempt doing that.
Hey,
so having a complete novice, they said, is impossible.
Beginner's luck.
So, and I tend to believe that the Pentagon was not actually struck by a plane.
Okay.
I tend to believe that one's a little bit more accurate.
Go on.
And the reasoning why is because the Pentagon is hit. They immediately come in to start doing the cleanup. Instead of doing forensic whatever, they basically strip topsoil, put new soil down. The wreckage of the plane that was removed was only removed, I believe it was 2 semi-trucks, flatbeds, which would not house all of the parts for a 747. So there's too many questions around the Pentagon that makes me say that this one possibly was not actually accurate. It was more likely a missile. That there was some sort of government documentation that did not want to be seen in the light of day, that the government used the tragedy of the plane striking the 2 towers to say, oh, there was an attack on the Pentagon.
Right. And it's funny because that probably was the one people cared about the least.
Yeah.
As well.
And that might also be the one that the news coverage did not cover nearly as much either.
Maybe they were just taking the pulse of the people. Well, it was 2 semi-trucks then that took away.
If I remember my numbers correctly, it was only 2 flatbed semi-trucks.
Well, hey, maybe there was a bunch of people with pickup trucks that were, Did you ever think of that? Maybe they were helping out as well. And so maybe. How many pickup trucks of
I don't know.
Again,
playing devil's advocate.
Playing the
let's play devil's advocate.
The role of the United States government.
Why would you strip and destroy evidence on the ground?
Right.
Like that doesn't. There's just way too many unanswered questions surrounding the Pentagon one that makes me think that there was something really there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it was. I'm not going to sit there and say that the conspiracy theories are accurate. I'm just saying there are way too many questions on the Pentagon one that don't have good answers.
Yeah. So the missile striking, why would they specifically target with just a singular missile at the Pentagon? What were they trying to do or cover up or hide, or what's kind of the purpose behind that?
From what I remember is the area that was struck was under reconstruction and was only housing documents pertaining to something. I'm not sure what I can't remember what they said it was.
Mm-hmm.
More or less because I don't really care what was destroyed. I more care about the simple fact that there are too many unanswered questions.
Yeah,
And I mean,
I'm
I'm sure the comment section is going to be blowing up. Oh, it was this.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, obviously the Pentagon, that's kind of like, that is like the headquarters for like, this is where we hide documents. But yeah, it's like, where's the secret at? It's at the Pentagon. Yeah.
Did the CIA have stashed how they, killed JFK?
Uh-oh.
I don't know.
Could be.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
But
so the last part of, unless you still wanted to hang out here, the last part of the piece of the puzzle from the 4 planes.
Which piece is that?
The plane that crashed in Pennsylvania.
Oh.
Anything on that? Unless you still had stuff with the Pentagon.
No. The Pentagon one, that's more or less the 3 major things that I always questioned.
Okay.
Why was the FBI grabbing surveillance footage so fast after the crash?
Right.
Plane flight, was it even possible? Doesn't seem like it. And then why was the wreckage
so minimal?
So minimal, and why was the physical evidence destroyed? Those are kind of the big things.
Okay.
There really is no conspiracy theory on that I know of that on the one that crashed in Pennsylvania.
Well, what was it supposedly headed toward?
If I remember correctly, it was supposed to be headed to the White House.
Oh, okay.
So, but
it wound up in Pennsylvania before
actually,
it crashed.
You made me think of another thing that I needed to question on the Pentagon.
Okay, yeah.
Which is the other reason why I questioned the Pentagon one, whether or not that was really a plane, is World Trade Centers. That makes sense.
Yeah.
White House being a potential target
Right.
makes sense, or the Capitol building if it was the Capitol building. I don't remember exactly which one. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What impact would a plane crashing into the Pentagon actually have? That one is not symbolic.
For me, the other 2 are more symbols, but for me, my thought is that's not where heads of government are, but that's where heads of military are. So the way that I've heard it explained was it was a 3-pronged attack to try to tear down America in the financial sector with the World Trade Center and what that represented, with the presidency and possibly head of the government, and then the head of the military. And so that would have been
that would have been the trifecta.
Yeah. And for them, I'm sure that for the culture of Afghanistan and the terrorists and what it meant to them, because they, whether you believe it or not, they really do have beliefs on why they think America was evil and why we needed to be torn down, and what the significance of tearing it down in those 3 separate sectors would have been. There are very religious reasons for that. So,
interestingly enough, that does make sense. I guess I never thought of it like that, and I don't recall ever hearing it quite phrased like that. In my mind, when you're doing a terrorist act, you're usually going after high-profile targets, and the Pentagon really was not. And maybe that's my take on it, because the news never really covered the Pentagon super hard.
Right.
And the Pentagon kind of became the latter news. I mean, the plane crashing in Pennsylvania, not doing anything other than loss of life on the American or on the passengers of the plane, got more media coverage than the Pentagon did.
Yeah, and that's where, well, if you're going to take out a military target, it can't be a base, because the base is going to see you coming in. They're going to take down the target. Yeah. And so what's going to be the greatest military target that you could possibly reach? And
well, I don't necessarily know if that's true, though, because, I mean, there was how many terrorist actions taken against U.S. naval ships in the Middle East?
Sure.
Right?
Sure. So but again, what does that ship itself represent, or what does one base represent?
Yeah.
It's like the Pentagon kind of represents all of the military.
Okay, that makes sense. So. Makes sense. Interesting.
Yeah.
Crap, we spent an hour and 15 minutes talking.
Well, shoot.
Basically conspiracies, and we didn't even dive into.
No,
this is just high level
view. Yeah.
If you guys enjoyed this and you want more, we can actually pull up and do the research and actually show you how these conspiracies, how they came to be, and what they actually entail. Because I'm doing most of this off of memory, and I don't think I've actually dived into most of these conspiracies in probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So
and I'm kind of a little bit more up to date on some of the more recent ones. But yeah,
like
leave
like the Wuhan.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Somebody ate bat soup.
Yeah,
it better have been delicious.
Yeah. And that's where I'll just encourage you, leave comments, leave links to news articles, stories, videos, whatever you think would kind of benefit the discussion on this. So we look forward to diving into that.
Actually, there was a documentary put out that does a fairly decent job on the 9/11. I can't what is Zeitgeist, I think it was. They actually cover 3 conspiracies. One is actually world Christianity. Maybe we should watch that and get your take on it.
React to it.
Well, basically, I said we weren't going to go past Pearl Harbor, but I'm going to dive into this real quick. High level, which is that Christianity is actually a ripoff of other stories. So like the story of Noah and the flood is actually Gilgamesh. The story of Gilgamesh. You know, that Jesus Christ was actually the second incarnate. Or
right. There's 7 other entities that have a similar story. Well, just a surface level view. Mike Winger. He's a popular YouTube Christian creator. He did a deep dive on some of that stuff as well, and so that could be a chance for me to research and dive in as well on the Christian side of it. So anyway, yeah.
But one thing that I've always enjoyed about the Zeitgeist conspiracy on the religion aspect of it is that, like, Jesus is supposed to represent the sun, and the 12 apostles actually represent the 12 zodiac signs. that all religion is actually a personification of the stars, and I actually like that interpretation because it actually does how to say it. It does actually bring forth the higher power in my mind.
Well, and there are symbols that exist in nature that God specifically set up to reflect actual realities. But again, it kind of, well then my mind jumps to, well then what about Judas? What's the fallen zodiac sign? You know what I mean? Those are some of the things that pop up
supposedly
in my
there
mind.
is a 13th zodiac sign that has been removed throughout history.
Right.
So
but
it's interesting.
But was it sort of a fallen from grace type of a thing? Was it betrayal in the history of the
So
and which one's mirroring which? Which one came first? You know.
Yeah. So I mean, I like that conspiracy, and I will leave it as a conspiracy because there is no way to prove what's actually right in that one shape or form. Again, I always go back to, I think science and religion and astronomy, the study of the stars, is a science. I think it is an explanation for the belief.
And I would say there's a difference between astronomy and astrology, and astronomy is a dedicated study field in science, and astrology is for white women with lattes. Come at me in the comments. I'm ready for you.
It is pumpkin spice season. Okay, well, let's end it, and I think we should actually dive into that conspiracy one. I think that'd be a good conversation you and I have.
Yeah.
So, perfect. Thank you guys for tuning in. Till next time.